Join me as I sit down with Tom Fox, a Catholic chaplain who spent time working with the VA and is currently working with patients suffering from Huntington's disease at Terrence Cardinal Cook Healthcare Center in Spanish Harlem, New York.
I was a hospice volunteer, went through training, and I would sit with people who were dying. And this was a mind-blowing experience for me because I remember sitting with someone who was unable to communicate, but I would just sit in the room by ourselves and pray. And it was extraordinary that I could actually feel noise in my head subside. Like, wow, this is what they talk about is true. Less of myself, more of others. And I also noticed and was aware that people from faith communities, people active in their faith, were just running through this last phase of life like it was a speed bump. They had their eyes set on something else. I had this experience with a nun. She was a hospice social worker, and we really hit it off. One day she said, let's pray together. And she went off. The phrases I heard were, thank you, God, for the gift of this cancer. It has brought me closer to you. I've heard people embrace their illnesses, and she was so emphatic, so authentic. It was so powerful. There was not an ounce of self-pity.
Tom will be sharing his journey from working in finance to pursuing work that serves others, and will be sharing his perspective on faith, recovery from alcohol addiction, and much more.
When the time came for me to transition out of work, I knew when I sat down at my desk, it was like, man, I can't do this shit anymore. There's no currency here. There's no value. And throughout my whole life, even as a kid, I just had this, what I would, the clinical reference would be to existential depression. What the fuck is it all about? Why are we here? What's the point? Service was coming, but it's just speaking louder and louder. I was able to navigate out the severance, and then I needed that because we were making lifestyle changes. I had to get rid of the house, get rid of the hammers, the nails, the CDs, the snowblower, the lawnmower, all the shit, shovels. And my wife wasn't completely on board. I was telling us, and she knew that I couldn't do the work anymore.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Before we get started, if you could hit the like, subscribe, or follow button on whichever platform you're consuming today's show. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining the show. I'm definitely looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. I have to say, you were since Wilderness Lodge in Disney.
Yeah, I was much smaller back then, right? And just to give the audience some background, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just briefly introducing yourself and kind of what you're working on now, and a little bit more of your professional and personal background.
Yeah, my name is Tom Fox. I'm a relative of Dan's. I live up here in New York City. I'm a chaplain in a Catholic healthcare facility in Spanish Harlem called Terrence Cardinal Cook Healthcare Center right now. I designated chaplain who works with Huntington's disease patients. So vicious neuromuscular disease that attacks virtually everything in the body and the mind. So I try to walk with these residents where they're at, try to relieve some of their suffering, bring in some other interventions that can bring some peace. I'm a Eucharistic minister, and giving out communion is another touch point. So I'm probably more liberal with giving it out than more traditional priests might be, because I feel the spiritual touch point is kind of a universal phenomenon, not just to a specific faith community. And then I'm also in recovery. This is a big month. This is a big year for me. I turned 70 in April, which I can't fully digest. And come October, I'll be sober 50 years. I came into AA in 1975. I was 20 years old, and it changed my life. So I have a lot of gratitude wrapped around that. It's kind of like a Rip Van Winkle phenomena, like waking up and like, holy shit, 70 years old, and it's been quite a life. So, so many things, get stirred up, around that. I had a finance career, was a director for a French bank. It's a fixed income institutional bond salesman, arranged financing transactions. And, I started after right after college, and entry-level job in the back office. All the while adhering to my 12-step community, jumping into the wheel of finance work, long hours, commuting from Long Island. It's just really on the wheel, spinning it, jumping on the wheel. And I never really felt this was where I belonged. I think I did well because I was filled with fear of failure, not smart enough, not from the right schools. So I pushed. I think I do believe that the stress of that hormone, I think cortisol, contributed to cardiovascular disease. And when I was 60 years old, I had a quadruple bypass surgery, and that prompted some significant changes that I all of a sudden came into focus. I mean, I remember coming back to work after that, and I started making some decisions even prior to that. I really dove into the phrase that you hear in the rooms, love and service. So I really started to shift prior to this surgery. I was a hospice volunteer. I went through training, and I would sit with people who were dying. And this was a mind-blowing experience for me, because I remember sitting with someone who was unable to communicate, but I would just sit in the room by ourselves and pray. And it was extraordinary that I could actually feel noise in my head subside. Like, wow, this is what they talk about is true. Less of myself, more of others. And I also noticed and was aware that people from faith communities, people active in their faith, were just running through this last phase of life like it was a speed bump. They had their eyes set on something else. And, I had this experience with a nun. She was a hospice social worker, and we really hit it off. And one day she said, let's pray together. And she went off. The phrases I heard were, thank you, God, for the gift of this cancer, because it has brought me closer to you. And, I've heard people embrace their illnesses, and but she was so emphatic, so authentic, and it was so powerful. There was not an ounce of self-pity in her. And she said, here, take down my phone number. If you ever need anything, call me. And there were people as they were dying, and my sponsor in AA was very similar, where they were doing service to the last breath, wherever they were. And it was just this way of life, whether it's Christ-centric or whatever your faith community is, it just transforms you. It was a gift to be a witness of it and to be a part of it. And then when the time came for me to transition out of work, I knew when I sat down at my desk, it was like, man, I can't do this shit anymore. There's no currency here. There's no value. And throughout my whole life, even as a kid, I just had this, what I would, I guess the clinical reference would be to existential depression. What the fuck is it all about? Why are we here? What's the point? And, service was just speaking louder and louder. I was able to navigate out the severance, and then I needed that because we were making lifestyle changes. I had to get rid of the house, get rid of the hammers, the nails, the CDs, the snowblower, the lawnmower, all the shit, shovels and the details. And it's just my wife wasn't completely on board. I was telling us, and she knew that I couldn't do the work anymore. The time had come, and it was over 30 years of doing this. The arteries had clogged up.
And this was after the procedure at 60, or this was before the procedure?
Yeah, I'm 60 years old, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I started acting differently. I started giving business away. One of my clients in Luxembourg, he always took these fantastic motorcycle trips, and I'm a motorcycle guy, and I always was too busy to go. And then when I knew I was getting out, I took my 2-week vacation prior to my stepping out, and I went to Europe. He had an extra motorcycle, and we went from Luxembourg to the south of France, northern Spain, into the Pyrenees. Like, wow, I got to say yes to life. And then I came back and spoke to the right French boss, and it was kind of like two sets of rules. You know, if like a French guy blew something up, they'd send a helicopter in and bring him back to France. If an American fucked up, you know, you're out. And, so I approached one of my many bosses, and I gave him a hypothetical question. If you had an employee in good standard, and I was there 19 years, and he needed to leave, you know, would you be able to lump him into a layoff? You know? He said, well, if you were to ask my colleague over here in this office, he'd probably say, well, if you don't want to work anymore, you can leave now. And he said, well, I'm not going to do that. You know, we're going to work on this. He helped me, put me into a layoff. I got out with a year's severance, which was remarkable. I was very grateful for it. And it enabled me to do this transition. And, you know, this conflict of where I belong, forcing myself to do work that I was hurting me physically. I had another medical procedure. I went into septic shock with a perforated large intestine from diverticulitis. Was in the emergency room, vibrating and turning red. And again, another like stress-related illness. And that was about maybe 5 years prior to the bypass surgery. And so, you know, I'm stepping out, and the idea is, while I was recovering from the surgery, I was contemplating, you know, what am I going to do? And this volunteer work, hospice work, was really strong. It really was working with me. I felt comfortable in this space, this sacred space between life and death, and that I can walk people through that process. And I felt this is where this was me. So, you know, this is naturally me. This is, I can do this. This is like, wow, I have an inherent skill set here. It's where I want to be. So I looked at some degrees, and I applied to Fordham Grad School, and the degree pastoral care, spiritual counsel kind of spoke to me. But my background isn't strong scholastically. I mean, you know, I'm coming into AA when I'm 20 years old, and I barely got out of high school. You know, there were a lot of problems. High school. I mean, I could always rely on physical strength, and these were the jobs that I had. I mean, I was a garbage man, concrete work, construction, and I can always rely on my physical strength. And as I'm progressing through recovery, I got hurt, sober, working for a moving company, and you know, I couldn't do the physical work anymore. What am I going to do? And college was in the background, and I really had to go back to Suffolk Community College, go to community college and take high school level courses. And I took a poetry class. I took math. I took classes that I struggled with, and I did well. And like I got extra help, and I went from there to Stony Brook and got my bachelor's degree. And, but I mean, school was always a real push, and I had a huge resume of failures and things I didn't do well in, and you know, that negative voice that you're not good enough, not smart enough, which was deep in my character. So, you know, I got through Stony Brook, and I took this entry level job at, you know, Wall Street. And like I was saying, we started at Fordham, and you know, even there, I confidence wasn't that strong, and I deferred my acceptance, and I did all the right things. I met professors. I wanted to make sure this was the right program for me. I did a good due diligence. One of the professors called me after I deferred, and I was about to defer again, and she invited me to be her grad assistant. So I was a 60-year-old grad assistant at Fordham University grad school. It cut the tuition bill, and I loved it. I mean, I loved going to school. I loved writing, but I noticed this phenomena, and it's a PTSD phenomena. It's like, for guys like us, every time I'd get like a written assignment, it was like, oh, fuck this, I'm out of here. I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? There's just no way. And you know, I got some coaching from friends of mine to help me push me through, and I'd get a great grade. You know, I'd get a great grade. But then the next assignment would come, and it wasn't like I had retained confidence, the belief that I could do it. I was at base camp again.
Yeah.
And like, why the fuck does this happen? You know, why aren't I holding on to the accomplishment, this recent history of success, and it just would evaporate. And this is a byproduct of childhood trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD, the repetition of trauma over extended period of time. That was my household, what it was like growing up.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to circle back on that in particular, the before recovery, before AA.
Yeah.
You mentioned dealing with some depression, not necessarily understanding what's the reason why we're all here, what's the meaning of life. And so I kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit and understand a little bit around what addiction looked like for you, and also maybe dive into, I guess, some of the childhood trauma that was probably layered in some of those outlets that were maybe involved in some of the usage back then.
Sure. Yeah, no, there was a lot of action in my house. It was the worst house on the block. Broken window, underneath the window, the plaster's falling on the floor. The furniture we got was from a junk shop, and I could never have friends over. At a pretty early age, violence, the fighting between my mother and father was horrific. And I'm the oldest of three. All the cliches were very, very true. I mean, I swear to God, I would never be like them, never drink. I would love my kids. And I'm like 8 or 9 years old. But I would be calling the police. I would be calling the cops to break up the fights. I would be wondering if we were going to go into Child Protective Services. If they're going to come and take us away. And there was nobody, the cops would come and my father would yuck it up with them and say, it's our time, it's that time of the month. And nothing changed, and he just, my hatred towards my father was deeply intense. He offered me food at the table and I wouldn't accept. And he was also a rageaholic. Things would set him off. And, I had a conversation with my sister, and she's my youngest sibling. And she told me, because we have different, it's interesting, different perspectives in the same family. And my father was on diet pills, which was speed, just accelerated his rage on top of the booze. And I would try to sleep in the backseat of the car, just try to hide from the noise. And I grew up scared. I just grew up full of fear, shaken, and a couple of rivets popped out, screws loose. And I was in summer school and elementary school. And then, as I remember vividly when I was 15, 16 years old, and I got a hold of a bottle of Boone's Farm apple wine. And man, I was a transformation. It's just electric. Absolutely like an explosion of lights. And I was not the guy that I despised. This feeling that I was, I couldn't control what was going on in my house. And I had suicidal ideation. I was writing suicide notes to try to change behavior. And
which behavior? The drinking behavior?
Their behavior. If they would only stop fighting, they change them. It's all like adult child of an alcoholic syndrome, where I would dilute the booze and pour it down the drain. The morning after just sucked. Chair would be broken in the kitchen. Maybe my mother threw a garbage can through the windshield of the car. It was just all sorts of stuff going on. So the suicide notes was an attempt to change other people's behavior. The contract that a child needs, safety and security. My profile as a victim was I need my surrounding environment to be stable, and that creates problems when you are an older adult, because people don't act the way you want them to. So what do you do? And AA says that if there's anything troubling you, the problem is you, and the solution lies within you. It's not, we can't control what people do, what they say.
Right.
Control my reaction. I can't control, I can't always control what it does to me. Maybe I needed a little additional help with that. But the shift now, the shift is getting away from trying to stabilize the outside world and getting into stabilizing myself, developing peace within myself, acceptance. And that's, that's the psychological shift from back then to today. The threads of that remain. And I'll never forget, I was 18, 19 years old, and I was sitting in the back seat of a patrol car, and the cop was taken down. I don't even know what I got picked up for. but he's writing down my name and address. And as soon as he hears my address, he goes, "Oh yeah, Fox University Place. That's the house with all the family disputes." And I was with a couple of friends of mine, and it's just like crushing. And even in junior high, before I even picked up alcohol, I had this intense self-loathing, how much I wanted to be transformed into another person, wanted to look different. I hated almost everything about me. And, it was like February, and I don't know, I saw this advertisement. Don't ask me why, but I remember the advertisement for Copper Tone tanning lotion, which was like a dye. And I went to the drugstore and I bought this shit and I put it all over my body. And I went from a white Irish guy to like some weird looking kid with complete different color.
Maybe a little bit more Italian, Long Island style.
I wanted to be Italian. I wanted the tan, and then I wanted the muscles and whatever, and then black hair and brown eyes, and didn't want blonde hair or blue eyes. And anyway, I got to show up at school like this, looking at this. It didn't go well. It did not go well. I looked like an orange in an egg pop. Pretty bad. And so booze took that away. And I also kind of think that alcohol saved me, because the depression was very legitimate. It was very, very pronounced. And even though I excelled in certain sports, I excelled in baseball. I played a little high school baseball. But when the seasonal sports transitioned to like basketball, I'll never forget this. All my friends are playing basketball across the street, and I couldn't cross the street to allow myself to be awkward and clumsy as I learn a sport. If I wasn't good at it right away, I wasn't going to even try. I wasn't even going to try. I just didn't have any cushion of self-esteem. And I remember in that same period of time, like junior high, I was on the Babe Ruth All-Star team, and I was starting in left field, and I was batting leadoff. And I left my house and walked down the block. The field was there. Microphones, banners. This is a big deal. This is the Babe Ruth All-Star. Cars are packed in the parking lot. But when I went onto the field, I could just feel myself collapse. I could feel myself like I don't belong here. Maybe there was a fight the night before. I all of a sudden I believed, and I told myself that I wasn't good, and I played accordingly. I played to that belief. I mean, it was a ground ball to left field, and it went through my legs. I couldn't throw it on a straight line. It was a high arc that went nowhere. And when I came up to bat, I knew the pitcher from my junior high school baseball team. The bat was heavy. He was big like Zeus throwing lightning bolts. And I was small, thin, and weak. Went down on 3 pitches. Sat on the bench the rest of the game. It was strange. In my high school yearbook, one guy wrote, "Tom, I'll never forget in Babe Ruth, where you batted 400 the first half of the year and disappeared second. Second half of the year was when I believed it sucked." That's how powerful what you think of yourself really is. And which has made me very, very grateful to AA, because that started to change.
Yeah.
Changed dramatically.
And what was that rock bottom point before you found AA? Was it that time with your friends in the cop car you described around 19 years old, or was there something other pivotal moment where you knew things had to change?
I mean, the world had gotten pretty small. I mean, people were going on to college and going on to other jobs, and my friends got very small. I mean, I hung out in a pool hall, and I made an initial attempt at community college, and I wound up drinking my way out of it. I mean, I was a piss in your bed drunk at that time. My sheets were crusty. I'm living in a room with my brother. I mean, nothing was going well. It was just, nothing was gonna get better. It was a series of shit jobs. And, I remember I came home drunk one night. I'm smoking a cigarette in this big chair in a room. And I wake up in bed. The room was smoky. I felt a tremendous pain on my ass. What happened was, the cushion was off the couch. I passed out drunk in the chair and started a fire. And I didn't even wake up while the chair was burning. My brother had a drag me to the bed, take the cushion into the backyard and hose it down. I mean, that's what it was like. I mean, I was the guy in the topless joint handing out flyers at the train station so I could, get a few drinks. And, that reality, but it really accelerated the process is I started going to a youth group. Right? Somewhere I met some girls and they were attractive and it was kind of Christian based, and they invited me to this youth group. Maybe it's some kind of reclamation project. I don't know. But I mean, I was clearly attracted to the girls. And what was happening, though, is the realization that I could not stop drinking. I would try and, I'd go to the bar and have a couple of Cokes. And next thing I know, I'm in somebody's backyard sleeping in a boat or something. One of the girls' father was in AA, and her brother was at the table of this youth group, and I got very frustrated. I kicked over some chairs, and I can't stop drinking, and I bolted out of there. I went to the pool hall. I knocked off a 6 half courts. That night, their father came to the pool hall. Bob was a very unorthodox guy, very gregarious. I didn't know him, but he approached me with his tattooed arms and in the pool hall. And he confronted me and said, "Tommy, I understand you have a problem with alcohol. You want to do something about it." And I was, drunk and intimidated, but I was at the end of my rope. I was contemplating, suicide was back in the picture. I re-injured myself on the back of a garbage truck, was folding dungarees in the basement of an Army Navy store, using every dime I could, stealing where I could to get money to drink. And that was it. It took me to a midnight meeting and actually physically had me in his house, into his house with his family, and took me around. The transition from the drinking world to the non-drinking world was just excruciating. I mean, everything was a big deal. Everything was catastrophized. And I vividly remember shaking, detoxing, trying to eat breakfast for like the first time, trying to put a list together of things to do, like, brush your teeth, make your bed, things like that. Read from a daily reflection AA book, and pray to help me not drink. I wanted to drink. And I remember like saying the concept of not drinking for the rest of my life, 20 years old, not like I was having fun, believe me.
Right.
I wasn't paying to stop. And I remember like on a Sunday afternoon before I came into AA, I mean, I'm in an old man bar, Sunday afternoon, the door opens, the light shines in, and I'm looking at life out there passing by. Here I am in this alleyway with a neon sign over it, drinking with old men. Oh, yeah. But my first job sober was pumping gas, and you would have thought I was doing brain surgery, like trying to fill out a credit card, and then they asked me to check the oil, and it's like, this was beyond my capacity. Just no way that and I remember that stress of like, just hanging on, just hanging on.
Yeah.
I didn't have a driver's license. They asked me to drive the customer home. Like I didn't. Well, what do you do? I mean, I didn't have any game plan on how to handle life, so I drove them home. But I felt so guilty that I did that. I made such a strange display. I said, I don't have a driver's license. I shouldn't be driving these people. Like all stressed out and with no balance. And that's all right. No big deal. Don't worry. We'll get somebody else to do it. But even then, like the sober transition was too much. I went to get a bottle. I had made $100 on a week's worth in the gas station, and I got the job knocking on doors from where I lived till I got this job pumping gas that I could walk to. That $100 in my pocket, and like I'm out of here. I just can't live in this world. Fuck this. I bought a pint of Fleischmann's in the liquor store, and my intent was to go into New York City, take the train in, and drink myself to death. I'm out of, So I get in the liquor store. I got a pint of Fleischmann's on the table, and I'm standing there, and I'm nervous. And I hear the bells ring on the door behind me. The guy behind the counter kind of looks up over my shoulder and says, "Do you two know each other?" It was my father coming in to get his bottle. And it just blew my mind. This is the man I despised, and here I am, just a carbon copy, just another drug. I called up my sponsor, Bob, and I poured it down the drain. I did not pick up. He put me on he kept saying that I had to hang in there for this Catholic retreat called the Crescia.
When was the last time you had seen your father before that encounter, if you recall?
I tried to avoid him, but periodically I don't have much reference to seeing him. Maybe infrequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I aligned myself with my mother. My sister aligned herself with my father, but I felt an attachment to my mother.
But you feel like seeing him in that moment kind of stopped you from pushing forward with your original plan.
It was shocking. I couldn't put all the pieces together at that moment, but just the shock of being in proximity to him. We didn't do anything to that. We didn't talk. So this was very dramatic.
You described, during a portion of AA was, or a time in your earlier life where you were trying to control your external world, and that what you learned in AA was that you could really only control yourself, your own actions, your behaviors. To me, that has a lot of foundation in, I think, a variety of religious contexts, but also in some philosophies too, like Stoic philosophy. I think about that as well. For maybe some of the listeners who might not be as familiar with AA, could you describe a little bit about its origins? What are the 12 steps? And I'd say maybe just a brief summary of how it's so effective at getting people from a state of addiction to breaking those cycles.
Yeah. Well, I had strong guys in AA that emphasized basic work. And I learned that in the early days, they emphasized change. You got to change the person that you bring in, that came in here. And they would talk about even fundamental changes, like how you go to work, how you put on your clothes, breaking routines, because all roads lead to booze. This introduction to the steps, I got deeper and deeper involved when I realized that I was engaging in the repetition of bad behavior blowing up my life here and there, and I couldn't stop it. So it was not disanalogous to the repetition of drinking. This, sex, power, money, food. The substance might be different, but the pattern is very similar. And I would say, I've learned, and I was so righteous about doing things my way, and I learned the hard way that I really need to follow the program as it's set up with good people and a community, and getting involved and taking the service commitment. And I remember the first service job I took in AA, and I really felt pretty special. I really felt, I was part of a community. This involvement, not drinking heightens your awareness. Why am I doing this? And I remember specifically when I was working in Wall Street, and I was in an area that I had no business being in. And let's just say the activity was sexually oriented. And I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
But I'm there. And I'm pissed off at God for allowing this to happen. And then all of a sudden I have this revelation. God is not going to do for me what I'm not willing to do for myself, which is the key, like they refer to as the 6th and 7th step of change. We get an idea. The first step is about being powerless. The second step is, a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And I really latched on to that one. That was my entry, like, wow. And then the third step, turn our life and will over to the care of God. And, I can't do this alone. And then what I like about AA is that God concept is my own personal God. This is my personal construction. It's not anybody, not any religious.
It's not like a Christian construct.
No, not anybody else's, but mine. And my sponsor was really good in the beginning. Anything I didn't understand, he'd just say, put it on the shelf. And don't get me wrong. I was pissed off at God. I was not a God guy. It did not come easy. It did not come right away. It was like, fuck him. I took a look at the 8th and 9th step, where we make amends and we make a list of people we had harmed and make direct amends. I took one look at that and I said, like, fuck them. They owe me an apology. Fuck this. And my anger to them was very strong. And, in the fourth step, we write down. We write down our behavior, write down what we did and what we do. And then we bring this to another individual and share it. This personal inventory. 6 and 7 step are the steps of change. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, where that phrase came in, like, God's not going to do for me what I'm not willing to do. So, the 8th and 9th step was really pivotal. I have to own my part. What was I like in that environment? And truth be told, I was a prick. I was stealing, cursing. I'm spitting in the clothes hamper, pissing in my bed. I'd be selling drugs out of the house. Guys would be coming to the front door, all sorts of stuff. No one was stopping me. And then in the 10th step was like a maintenance step. Look at it. How am I doing today? Where am I at today? How are things going? 11th step, one of my favorites, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. That's a big part of my life on a daily basis. And, there's a section in the 12th step, and I kind of want to read it to you because I carry this book with me.
Yeah.
Man, I love this open forum of spiritual exploration. And I read, I got into music, I went to monasteries, and I still do, motorcycle trips, the woods, and, in this second half of the 12th step in this book, the 12 and 12, is this radical reorientation to life, or orientation to life. It's about our relationship with money, how a job is an opportunity for service. And there's one phrase, I took it to memory, and I would repeat it while I was working at the French bank. True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God. Now, here I am, on Wall Street. Ambition is to accumulate, acquire, and self-promote.
Yeah.
And this is telling me to operate. This is guiding me to operate. And it resonated with me. I'm like, yeah, this is me. I can do this. This is where I belong. And there is this conflict with money and stuff. And at 70 years old, and sometimes I'm scratching my head, and I say, maybe I should have stuck it out another year or two. I could use the money. But no way. I'm grateful I was able to make some radical decisions and move in a different direction.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that's an amazing, inspirational story. And, it's not like the work was done at a very specific point in time over a short period of time. This is, continuous work and evolution over a lifetime that still takes continuous focus and discipline towards leaving a certain way. I think about just today in society, increases in suicide rate. I think there is still a continuous, I would say, detachment towards seeking the divine, probably at least certainly towards younger generations. And it does feel like there's a sense of aimlessness, and perhaps people are attached towards chasing the pleasure train, power, money. Do you feel like these cycles are just timeless stories that are continuously, perpetuated across societies and ages? Or do you feel like in this present day that the disconnect on those things is greater than perhaps it even was, call it 50 years ago?
I try not to make comparison, like an old man. I try not to. And I think it was a good observation on your part on how to live, is to remain a student in this process, and that there is a spiritual evolution that continues. It's not like you arrive. There's no arriving. I may get on the other side of something, but I don't arrive. And that's why I like to refer, I'm almost 50 years sober, but I also like to say that there's no currency in time. It's a 24-hour program. I can be as fucked up today as I as I was, 51 years ago. I mean, and I'm also, humbled by the limitations of me as an individual. I mean, the mind that got me drunk is incapable of thinking me well. I mean, and that even is analogous to Plato's allegory of the cave. Like the shadows aren't going to teach me what to do. There's got to be some other outside input. I need connection. I need to be with people. And this spiritual exploration, it's just like phenomenal. Like this, even this opportunity to sit down with you. We haven't seen each other in many years.
Yeah.
To share real life stuff. I don't know, if the human condition is pretty much the same template that it's always been. I mean, the surrounding environments have changed. I love referencing like literature, like the psychology in literature, poetry. I think anything that highlights the soul, it's just magnificent. And we didn't. After I got through grad school and I started to hear this term chaplaincy, and I was steered towards the director of chaplains for the Manhattan VA, and we started talking about this, and he invited me to apply to the VA chaplain training program. This was like extraordinary. It's 3 years, one of the best 3 years of my life. I went through that 1-year training program. Chaplain training is referred to as clinical pastoral education. So I went through all 4 parts, and I did my clinical hours. I was all prepared to do hospice work. I had already met with the palliative care director, and the last minute I get a phone call is that we really need somebody in the psych ward. We don't need we got somebody else for hospice work, and I wasn't happy. I was not. Double locked doors. It's not it's an intimidating place, but I do believe God is really in charge, and he's really knows what's best for me. Because I clearly wouldn't have volunteered for this, and I wasn't going to say no. And I had the skill sets, I had the damage, I had the vulnerability to be effective. And I wound up staying there for 3 years. I did 2 fellowships. I really didn't want to leave. And but the time came where it was time to leave. But you talk about purpose, meaning, working with men and women, mental trauma unit. It was so dynamic. There was so much coming out. It was not only seeing patterns in my own life, but working with really top-notch psychiatrists, psychologists. The devastating stories of daily suicide in the 20s is just crippling. Housing. Listen, it's not a perfect system by any stretch, but they won't refuse anybody who comes in. And there was, just one powerful story was, this one veteran who was a Vietnam vet, and he had lost his 2 best friends on patrol in Vietnam right in front of him. He went into a faith crisis, drug addiction, and in and out of VA hospitals. He was so fragile, so thin. You had to approach him from the front gently. And I was talking to him, and he was telling me the story. He was in a VA hospital. He was talking to his chaplain. He was in a psych ward. He was talking about his faith crisis. He said, how can there be a loving God when there's violence and my friends killed? And where is the benevolence? Where is this? There's no God in this world. And the military chaplain said to him, listen, we don't live in God's world. We live in man's world. And we hurt each other. But it's our responsibility for those of us that know we're here to do God's work in man's world. We're here on this planet to help each other move a little bit forward, help each other carry their pain. I was really overwhelmed with that statement because it just speaks of love and service.
Yep.
The meaning, purpose is to help each other. And I got involved in doing a lot of interesting things there that I never thought I would do. I did a writing workshop. I brought in poetry. I had in my groups, I would have guys, we would write our own poem. Everybody would bring in a phrase or a sentence or a word, and we put our own poem together. And it really took off.
I've heard a lot about this is introducing creative concepts, whether it's journaling, drawing, painting, poetry, as for types of treatment towards depression, mental health issues. What is the, I guess, benefit there? How does those types of creative practices help people process, I guess, their situation or perhaps overcome whatever challenges they're facing?
Well, I can only share, my own experience, but I would see the satisfaction. I mean, I would have veterans on the psych unit like bringing me stuff that they had written. I mean, just remarkable.
Yeah.
It seems to tap into, I mean, for myself, the ability to articulate the pain and to sift through all the layers and to expound on it and to illuminate it and put it into phrase and utilize specific words to highlight a specific feeling and to change it and to elaborate on it. There is this tremendous sense of, I could feel self-satisfaction, sense of like feeling good about yourself and creating, like any artist.
Yeah.
It's transformative.
Right.
I think there's a degree. I think there's a degree in Columbia. One of the psychologists was telling me about. Well, I think it's called narrative therapy, where this process of writing, journaling. I mean, for myself, I would really make it kind of sacred. I would use the fountain pen, and then I had various books, and I would write. I wrote from the beginning. Writing is a big part of my recovery.
And well, then that piece, what you just mentioned, the narrative therapy, reminded me of what you talked about back when you were playing baseball, right? And it was like the negative self-talk and the self-esteem, how it was so tied to performance, and then also just creating a vicious cycle of kind of mindset behaviors and actions that just gets in a loop. And like the narrative therapy, or you just mentioned journaling, just allows someone to, I guess, kind of rewrite the story and maybe help get out of that loop a little bit, of that cycle.
It gives you a little perspective. Yeah, and the ability to articulate that. I think it moves you a little bit, gives you a little space.
Through your experience and now, working at having that experience at the VA, you talked about being temporarily a hospice volunteer and now working with folks combating Huntington's. You've certainly had a lot of experience in dealing with people, towards the end of their life. What would you say those experiences have taught you about the meaning of life, and how has it changed you over this, I guess, past roughly 10 years or so of doing this type of work?
Yeah, I mean, geez, I'm in the process, man. I've had this condition of major depressive disorder, and I've had to contend with it and try to learn to show up with it. I went to Lenox Hill Depression Clinic a couple of years ago, and I went through transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it had some positive effects. I try to not rely on medication for side effects, and I think this stuff is not going to go away. The service work is not going to necessarily fix me, but carrying this with the image of Christ carrying the cross, not to be too religious, but just this is example of God did not intervene and take the cross away and make it easier. God did not step in and tell him you don't have to take this road. You don't have to die the way you're going to die. I mean, this is how we are in the world. I'm carrying stuff. You're carrying stuff. Every now and then we get a little help with some friends of ours and people we need. But as far as this existential angst, I mean, meaning and purpose is in love and service for me. And I'm still going to be carrying my stuff. I'm not looking for the Anthony Robbins solution. Not looking for to be fixed. I was at some point. I was looking to be. I wanted everything tied up, and I thought that was part of the deal. But start doing God's work, then He's going to fix me. He's and everything's going to be all right. But, I got to learn to carry my stuff while I'm doing God's work. It's a big relief. I mean, I kind of like myself the way I am, all a little fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think everything that we go through, I mean, Henry Nouwen put it best, the wounded healer. I mean, we're on this planet to help heal people.
Yeah.
And we're along the way. I just love the incorporation, good writing. I mean, I just the exploration and literature and poetry, just theater. Man, it's. I mean, God reveals Himself in these places. And listen, we're in life to enjoy life too. I got into like motorcycling. Took these trips with my friend of mine. And I would be a little kid in the backseat of the car. We're driving up to the Adirondacks and Plymouth Belvedere filled up with smoke and cigarettes. And I'm looking out the window and I see this guy driving by, smiling, fresh air, breathing well. And wow, I want to do that. And I did it. I mean, I was obsessed with motorcycles. And it was kind of like it was analogous. Like I would buy the shittiest motorcycle instead of buying something nice when I got some money together. I would try to, fix it, bring it back to life. And that was what was happening to me in my recovery. Until as I felt better and better about myself, I bought better and better motorcycles. And then, I'm taking these fantastic trips with a friend of mine, and we would just have a direction. We would just go. Get lost. And the same thing with like the woods and the Adirondacks. I mean, I took my kids on these outrageous canoe trips in the middle of nowhere. No campsites. We were on our own, and they're young, but I'm doing what I want to do. They're the excuse. I'm going to introduce you to the woods. I got pretty good at it. Had a lot of fun.
I find that those moments in solitude and in nature are like such good reminders for something that you said earlier too, which is like this. It's like a reminder of that we are not in control of this, right? We could only control ourselves. It's just a powerful reminder of the external.
Yeah,
that I find very refreshing, and then is also that momentary period where we could disconnect from the technology and the hustle and bustle that is ever present in our lives, and just like kind of go internal and find that stillness, find that silence.
Yeah, I mean, I gravitated early to monasteries. I two friends of mine in AA, and I mean, I've been to monastery. I mean, I've been to Gethsemane in Kentucky, where your grandfather went after the Korean War. Up in Elmira, there's one. I would visit the grandparents when I would go there. Genesee, upstate New York. My go-to is Elmira, and then Berryville, Virginia is another one. Yeah, that really speaks to me. And I think that the ability to make decisions on to go to places that are good for me is key in my own personal self-care.
How much time would you spend at various monasteries, and over like what period of time?
Like 5 days is like the most, maybe a week. 3 to 5 is about the average. What really speaks to me is that silence, and I always have these notebooks with me that I'm writing something in, and I can finish things that I've started. And what speaks to me is how the monks work their entire life around their prayer, the times that they pray, 5 or 6 times a day.
Right.
Everything else, takes a backseat. But various times throughout the day, that's what they do. It kind of helps me to remind me to take time out, pray a little bit throughout the day.
Yeah. You mentioned, not wanting to have a medicated approach to dealing with some of the depression symptoms that you work through. And you obviously just mentioned now prayer. I think a little earlier you mentioned meditation as well. And I'm just curious, like, how do mindfulness practices, potentially things like breath practices and also prayer, how do all those things play into the mix of kind of your daily or weekly routines? And have you tried things like, I guess, breath work, and is meditation something that you do as well in addition to your prayers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say meditation is like the final frontier that I'm still trying to crack into on a regular basis. I can't say that I do it periodically. It's not part of my daily practice. Prayer, is part of the practice. I'm fortunate that I work at a Catholic facility and we do mass every day, and that's really really helpful. I wheel in Huntington's patients, and that kind of service oriented work is quiets me, and it's kind of part of a prayer life. I kind of look at what I try to do as a prayer. And writing is a big part of that practice too. Writing is something I need to do on a regular basis. I feel good about myself when I do that. One of the things they talk about in chaplaincy and your own development and your own self-care, is really to have a list. What do I need to do that makes me feel good? What do I need to do? What are the things that I need to reach for that work for me and to execute that, not just to have a list?
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Tom, I find your story extremely inspirational. I think I learned things about my family today. Like I didn't realize my grandpa had went to a monastery in Kentucky. So and I just appreciate you stepping in and telling your story authentically and owning your wholeness. I think the story of always wanting to correct oneself or find a self-improvement as a way to hide maybe these darker sides of ourselves, I think is a very human condition that a lot of us go through. And I just loved what you said at the end there. I loved as much the fucked up parts of me as, the great things. And it's just like how those things blend together to make who you are so great. And I think there's no one better to be helping people through Huntington's, through recovery, through sharing your stories and experiences, given the hardships that you've had and the struggles that you've overcome with and deal with on a daily basis, and such authenticity. And I'm super appreciative of the time and sitting down with me today on the channel.
This was great, Dan. I loved your company, and I really got deep into writing, and then when it became apparent that service was the only way to go, that service was the answer to the existential depression, the service, thinking less of myself. God, please help me not be so fucking self-absorbed.
Yeah.
But there was a poem that I wrote that really encapsulated the direction, and I'd just like to share it with you.
For sure, please.
It's called Help Others. Help me, please, to serve others other than my madness. Help me carry peace and love to those consumed by sadness. Help me, please, to step beyond my stumble of duress, to calm the wars that rage inside my world replete with stress. Help me, please, to listen more, to bring some words of kindness to those who struggle and resist behind a veil of loneliness. Help me, please, to reach outside, to comfort those like left behind, to go beyond where I abide. Help me, please, be gentle and kind.
That's beautiful. I couldn't think of better words we need right now than just to be probably more kind to ourselves and more kind to others.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I appreciate the time very much. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you. It was good to meet you in a different life.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into the episode. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation with Tom. I certainly appreciated his authenticity and vulnerability in sharing his story. And it was nice to see him in a different light and get to know him a little bit better than I had previously. I wanted to reflect on at least one of the things that Tom discussed during our conversation and kind of share them as a takeaway from the conversation. I think there were so many good golden nuggets to pull out of that. But one thing that stuck out to me was the piece around writing, journaling, creative outlets, the arts, time in nature, silence, stillness. A lot of these things are right brain activities. And interestingly enough, I was at a conference this past week, and it was after the conversation with Tom. And it was about happiness. It was from an author that I really like named Arthur Brooks. And he was talking about how having the answers to deeper level questions around meaning and purpose is a right brain activity and also an important component of helping people improve their happiness. And so I thought there was an interesting connection there between the activities and the benefits it's had and that Tom has seen in his personal life and with others that he works with, and also the correlation between the areas that it is activating in the brain, where these deeper questions are kind of where people find some sense of coherence that could help improve their happiness. And so I guess the encouragement would be, if you maybe journaling or painting or certain art practices or time in silence and meditation or prayer aren't something that you're doing actively today, then, I'd certainly encourage maybe picking one of those things that seems interesting to you and giving it a shot and seeing how it helps in terms of improving calmness and happiness, or just having a more and greater sense of clarity and purpose in life. Thanks for tuning in again. Please like, follow, subscribe, leave comments in the sections if you're interested in potentially exploring a certain topic. Would love to hear from you. And until next time, have a good one.